You're gonna bring us in with some piano?
With a little bit of in church.
Like the old church days. Yeah, bring us in. Yeah, hello. And welcome to Projector and the Flail. It's a brand.
Sometimes I get lucky.
It's the startup church.
Let me.
Okay.
I have to get lucky.
Do the microphones picking up this beautiful music?
Barely, probably.
Okay. Hello, and welcome to Projector and the Flail. I am your host and guide and projector, Jessa Reed. Here with me is a multitasking, never finishing anything flail, Mark Pontius, who never finished his piano lessons. Today we're going to talk about up in those tithes. God recently told me that he would like you to spend 25% of your income towards our cult. Oh, that sounded like a beginning of that sounded like the beginning of Firestarter. Not Firestarter, but the other really good song, Prodigy? The other good Prodigy song that I loved does that. The other way. Yep. Okay, hello. Welcome. Mark just plays the keyboard the whole time. Welcome to Projector and the Flail. I am actually the multitasking extraordinaire, Jessa Reed. Here I have Mark Pontius.
I can
co-host.
multitask. I'm a fucking drummer, for God's sake.
Yeah. Well, multitasking is just the multi-hyphenate,
Yeah.
I wasn't.
I get what you're saying.
I wasn't.
I can do this with my foot and do this with my hand
I
at
cannot.
the same time. And I can do it with this hand.
No, my limbs cannot multitask. I can just have a lot of logs in the fire. There's no. Every time I see you playing, I'm like, how do you get? That's
I can't
the
multitask
rubbing your
with
belly.
my brain very much. I can multitask with my limbs.
Yeah, I can have 25 different things going on at the same time, and
finish none of them.
And finish none of them. Finishing is overrated. This is going to be the episode where we tell you stories about ourselves that we feel like we've already told 500 times. And so I'm saying that out loud because it makes it feel less insane.
I have a real aversion to it.
Yeah. It's hard for you not to be like completely authentic and
be like fresh and new. Like
right.
if I'm repeating something, even if nobody else has heard it, I'm like, it feels like I'm on some hamster wheel and it starts to feel monotonous and boring. Therefore, it's not communicated with excitement. And it's not really good story to hear from somebody that's like feeling like they're repeating themselves. But that's my own problem. I think I had that in press and experiences in the band where you're like asked 100 times, what is the meaning of this song? What's your favorite song right now? Like, what the fuck?
The songs they ask musicians would make me put my head through a wall, to be honest. But yeah.
Should I not be cussing if this is going to be on YouTube? Can you cuss on YouTube? You can cuss on YouTube?
Can cuss.
Sorry, I just got to 2024.
You just can't say vaccine.
Well.
You just can't say beep scene.
Well, we've blown that one.
I don't know.
What about poisonous shot?
Yeah, I don't know if that's it. We'll take that out. I don't know. I'm sure there are other things you're not allowed to say, but that's the one that I know that you used to not be allowed to say.
Yeah, it's interesting what they actually do, censor on there now, because I've heard people talk about some wild shit that I would think would be censored, but I guess if you talk about it in code word, it kind of doesn't.
I have a theory that most of the people that get censored fucking love getting they love the story of that. They love that mythology of us versus them. It's, the people that do like, we follow a wide variety of people, and the people who have like made an entire platform out of predicting the next thing that's going to happen. Or I follow a guy who does news updates, that are maybe the mainstream propaganda things aren't putting out. And he's so stoked when he gets shadow banned. He doesn't know that he's stoked when he gets shadow banned, but he loves the mythology,
the narrative
of being someone trying to bring the truth forward and being stopped, you know?
Yeah.
And so I always thought, like, when there were higher levels of censorship, I'm like, have you guys ever bought drugs over the phone before? Do you not know how to just use a different word? I mean, we used to text like, hey, do you have half of a t-shirt? And everyone knew what the fuck that meant. It's like, just have some finesse. You want to be an outlaw so bad. Why don't you learn how to be an actual outlaw and just stop saying the exact word that the algorithm, like, they think like the CEO of YouTube is sitting back and waiting for them to talk about the news, you know? And so I'm like, you love to play that character. And so then you go and say the most obvious straight words that the algorithm is looking for. And then you're like, I can't believe I'm being persecuted. And it's like, yeah, you're being persecuted for having like no street smarts whatsoever. Like having no, you know, I think everybody should spend a couple years on the streets.
It's one of the downfalls of social media, the idea that I think Andy Warhol said a long time ago is at some point everybody's going to have their 5 seconds of fame. And the desire, that's like a shadowy desire for some people that they don't realize is making them have this storyline of like, well, I should be able to be up here and continue being famous. I should be able to say whatever I want. That even in itself is like, they don't realize that they want to get canceled because it kind of makes another talking point to become trendy with. It's
right.
Like, oh, I'm getting canceled a lot. I must be saying some real shit that they don't want us to hear. So it's like, it's a weird time to have it be where like literally everybody can get famous. And so there's shadowy desire to get into that field of getting attention. You know?
I can't believe that people think reality is real. We've not talked about this. Are you familiar with the Hawk Tua girl?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's insane. It's incredible.
I watched a TikTok.
She has security guards walking around with her now.
Yeah. And they're talking about how she should have received press training. So we're talking about a girl who was drunk and just got interviewed by a man on the street type thing. And then I can't even remember what he asked her, but she goes, you got a Hawk Tua on that thing or whatever. She's obviously talking about like a blowjob of some sort. And a blowjob of some sort. I don't know what's happening to me. I'm turning into a grandmother. And then she hid out for a minute because she was like drunk when she said it out at a bar. And then I saw somebody say like, you should come out and get a following and you'll have to deal with being the Hawk Tua girl for a couple years, but then, you know, whatever you decide to do with it, whatever. So then you see that she does that. And now she's doing like, she's like concerts. You know, she's doing like,
she's on
what's
Bill
it called?
Maher just recently.
Shut the fuck up. Shut up.
Yeah. And it got weird.
Of course it got
Because
weird.
he started talking to her about like sex and stuff.
Ew.
And she got uncomfortable, but like he's just being, it's so weird that there's somebody like that is going on to like big shows that are notoriously about having guests on that like have a career of something.
A political perspective.
Or a political perspective for Bill Maher, but she's on other things that are just, and it's literally like she got famous for saying this funny thing. She's not necessarily a comedian, I don't think. I mean, she's kind of funny and she seems to be authentic, but she's like 21. And like that's wild to be, you get so uber famous for like one little thing you said that was off the cuff, that's funny. And that's all you're really known for. Like we have to discover, maybe, I'm sure she's got some kind of something, you know, and she can leverage that attention for some kind of career path, but she's so young. It's like, and everybody just wants to have her on to like match that trend. It's like, we're going to go check out that podcast that the Hawk Tua girl's on because we want to know more about her. But like, it doesn't, it's weird to see her like, she's literally got security guards with her, like pushing people back to get into clubs and stuff. It's like,
you can't believe reality's real. You cannot believe this is real. So for some reason in my FYP, there's a lot of commentary on it because I think it's really interesting when people go viral for something so small or whatever. And then it's like this instant fame, which to me is like, we're trying to be done with the idea of fame, with the pedestalization of fame. So it's becoming satire, you know? But I'm in like Hawk Tua girl commentary talk, and there was someone talking about how like everyone should have some level of press training so they are prepared for this moment. And I'm like, no, we don't. No.
Press training is stupid. It's like literally stupid. Meant to make you like, inauthentic and homogenized to like leveraging, saying the right thing so you get more attention instead of being authentic in the moment.
And it's so you don't fuck over your record label. I don't think,
Yeah. It's to train you how to go with the narrative of whatever it is for whatever field you're in. That stuff felt so cringy when I was doing it. And it made it more complicated for me to actually be authentic. Like, it was hard to go, oh, I'm supposed to say, I know I've been trained to respond this way to this kind of question, but really I feel differently, and I want to say what I feel like I want to say, but I've been trained that that's going to be troublesome if I do that,
Yeah, I can see the effects of press training on you when you see like videos or like content and stuff you were making pre-press training, and then years.
Finally, we just like it burnt off, and I was like, "Fuck, I'm gonna say what I want to say."
Yeah.
When I'm invited to say something, because it was like very rare that I
never
had any space to say what I thought. But
so a lot of this podcast is going to be based. Well, the premise so far, and this will probably change because we are people who like to change, but the premise, the idea is a conversation between two people who are wired very different and have very different yet usually compatible perspectives on things. And through the lens of usually human design, but also astrology, something that just popped in my mind right now talking about press training was Chiron and Gemini, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. If you are not familiar with human design, I would go look into it. This entire thing is not going to be a human design lesson, but it will be from that perspective. You can go to myhumandesign.com, type in your birth details, and find out what you are. It can be really complicated, just like astrology can be very complicated. We have been learning about it for years. And, start at the beginning. There's 5 energy types. There are projectors, reflectors, manifestors, generators, and then manifesting generators, which are another type of generator.
It's not a cult. It's going to seem like a cult in the beginning.
Yeah, I guess I define cult different. I define cult as there's a concentrated like leadership at the top, and you're not allowed to question it without being punished. That you get separated from your family.
The guy who started it, Ra, is.
Oh, well, it's
like
extremely
culty or cliquey kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's like more cliquey than.
I find the people who are like the big voices on it, a lot of them to be annoying and kind of in their ego or whatever. But I find everyone about everything to be like that,
For me, when I first learned about it, I had this feeling that it was like, oh, this is cliquey and this is maybe just a tool, like a expanded astrology. But the thing that then, and this is what I tell people that are still questioning it, if it's valid or not, is if you actually just dive into your chart and try to get more information on the depths of what it's saying you are and how you work, there's the information like does liberate you. It makes you understand yourself a lot more. And so it's like, no matter who it came from and how it got there, if you take the content from what it is and try to like work with it, it's extremely valuable. It doesn't need to be something that you have to commit to like some religion or anything. It's just literally a really advanced tool of understanding people and yourself. And so like beyond the critical factor that might come up right when you read it, it's like, oh, this is some other kind of new age religious thing.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's just like dive into it deeply for yourself. If it resonates, keep moving forward. If it doesn't resonate, then back off. That's what I did. Like when I first got into it, it was like a week of looking into it, and then I just forgot about it until it came back around, and then I was like, this really resonates actually. Like I want to understand more about it. And then it started to become, oh, this is like the best container for all of what I've been learning about individual like enlightenment and all of that.
Yeah, I think I was same thing. I learned a little bit about it and then was like yawn and then moved on. What I like about it, and I don't resonate with all of it, and so in my whole life, the premise that I'm operating from, the perspective that I'm operating from is that reality is some sort of interactive video game. And that within the video game, you will come across tools that will help you accomplish the things that your character wants to accomplish. And I can get messages from song lyrics, Laffy Taffy rap, or whatever. Something that people get really caught up in. I think people who are more drawn to like dogma or like scientific materialism or whatever, more left-brained kind of people, get caught up in like, where did the guy get the information? Did he take the information from someone else? Did he channel it? What does channeling mean? To where I'm like, no, literally, this is just a map that was sitting on the street. I'm not trying to fucking follow this guy blindly. I don't get lost in personalities like that. I'm not a follower. So none of that stuff matters to me. I'm like, here's a map. And what I like about it right now is that a lot of it is very left-brained. It's a lot of like containers is the only way I know how to describe it. It's a lot of boxes, categories of reason for things that I feel but haven't had, you know, like a file. It's like labeled files in the drawer, you know, that I can like put these things in. It's giving language to a lot of energetic things that I think a lot of us are tuning into. And my favorite thing about it is that it is encouraging decentralization and differentiation. And my belief is that we are going from a hundreds, thousands really, but specifically the last 400 years, a video game that was homogenized and it was a consensus video game. So everyone's playing the same video game. They're playing it from different perspectives, but like, let's say whatever you want to call capitalism, colonialism, like whatever you want to call this thing where the whole world, globalism, everyone's on the same page. Some are really benefiting from it. Some are suffering from it, whatever. But everyone has been expected to capitulate, like conform and homogenize to this thing. And we are moving out of that. And the thing we are moving into is very individual. And I know that from some shit that aliens told me 24 years ago. God. And the thing I like about this is it's really encouraging people to be their own thing. I'm so loudly swallowing into this microphone right now. One just small thing that I can't remember, I think Kelsey told me about human design that just really clicked. So just the main energy types, the 5 main energy types. If the world worked according to human design, manifestors would come up with an idea, kind of channel an idea, and they would initiate it. And then they would hand it over to a group of generators who are, by the way, excited about the thing. That's the key. In this framework, everyone's only doing what they are excited about. In the old framework, everyone sells their soul to build infrastructure, sacrifice the individual to build infrastructure. Everybody step in line, eke away your existence at a job you hate. You buy a house so you have a place to put your body in between working. You raise kids, you make them go to fucking school so they can get conditioned to become a worker in this thing. Don't be yourself. Don't be weird. Don't step out of line. This is what beauty is. This is whatever. It's a fucking nightmare for me, someone like me. Someone else telling you what to do, when to stop your car, when to start your car, you have to get permission to own the car. Bullshit. Moving forward, we're moving into a video game where everything kind of breaks back apart. And a lot of innovation comes as a result of individuals being individuals. And the deconditioning process of that we are very, very much in, but very much into talking about as well, is the individuals remembering who they are. And that's what I would call awakening in 2024, is remembering who you are. And it takes years of deconditioning what was pumped into your head or what you were punished for not being when you were young or whatever. So for most people who actually look into human design feels like a permission slip to be yourself. Mm-hmm. So if the world ran according to human design, like this framework, which it won't because it probably will never get organized like that, but manifestors come up with these ideas, these sparks of genius, but they don't actually have the energy or the capacity to follow those through. So they would hand it over to a group of generators, and generators are the heartbeat of the world. They are the world's, and the game does not run without them. A lot of people think, oh, I'm just a generator because there's more generators than anyone else. But there's more generators than anyone else because you're the fucking batteries of the world and the most capable of taking something from point A to point B as long as you're excited about it. So the manifestor puts something out, a group of generators who are fucking stoked on it come in and make it happen. And then manifesting generators come in and play with it, learn it, and then find the shortcuts and make it more efficient and get rid of whatever's not. And then they bounce it out. The way that Kelsey used to describe it is like if each game was happening in a football field, the projectors would be up in like lifeguard chairs around the football field, and generators and manifesting generators can get kind of like lost in the sauce, like get confused about what it is that they want to be doing or whatever. And projectors are there to guide. So then every time a generator is feeling like, and a lot of times I think that the thing that generators and manifesting generators can get fucked up about is they're continuing to do something they don't want to do anymore. And they're starting to hate it. And so then they run up to the projector that they resonate with. Each projector has a different perspective, a different thing to offer. And they run up to that projector, and that projector guides them. You know, they invite the projector to guide them, and then they point the thing out. So I'm surrounded by projectors. Let's say Lacey is the projector I go to when I forget what I'm really here to do. She's like constantly reminding me that I am here to enter, that I'm a clown, you know, that I'm here to entertain, that I'm here to talk. Sometimes I call her and I'm like, I'm starting a nonprofit. She's like, that's not, you don't want to do that, you know? And you are, not to tell your story, the projector when I'm not being authentic, you know, and I need guidance in getting back into that authenticity. You know, I'm performing or I'm hiding or whatever. And then reflectors, I don't know a ton about. So reflectors just exist and they take in everyone's energy and reflect it back. And there are not very many of them, but just their existence kind of keeps the whole thing moving. So that is the general premise. So I am a manifesting generator. So I am a shortcut finder, and Mark is a projector and he is a guide.
A lifeguard.
Making
sure nobody drowns, or not football. That makes sure nobody tackles too hard. What the fuck? You don't have lifeguards in football.
Is it that the description's good though?
No, the description's good. Yeah, yeah. So the manifesting generators would be the coaches, probably. Somewhat.
Well, it's just
the refs are the,
you know, the metaphor
projectors.
falls apart when,
no, I think it's good. I think there's just like you had to go more than just projectors being the lifeguards. Like
it's a company or something being run. It's a video game being run on a football field but it's not football. So
weird.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. That was a good metaphor. We got 10% out.
So if you've interacted with human design, there are a couple of people. I saw a comment recently that was like, human design ruined my dad's life. He did nothing, but he's waiting for an invitation. And it's like, okay, well, that's dogma. And that is where you're turning it into a cult. Like, for me, it's been permission slips, and it's been like most of these energy types don't fit in the homogenized reality. The world where you're like expected to mask and use manners, and this is how you're supposed to talk, and this is how you're supposed to show up, and this is how much energy you're supposed to have, and you're supposed to work and pull yourself up by your bootstraps and then pick something when you're 18 and stick to it for the rest of your life. Pick a partner when you're 21 and stay married to them for the rest of your life. And so for those of us whose energy doesn't work like that, we have carried this kind of shame about there being something wrong with us our entire life. And it is now pretty obvious that my way of moving through the world is great for me because my life currently is firing on all cylinders. And the people in my life now are you can't deny it. You can't deny that the way that I pivot and move over here, do something different and start things and then don't finish them and whatever has worked for me. But when I was younger, I got a lot of like eye rolling, because manifesting generators, we go in, we play with it, we get the gist. That's my thing. I got the gist. And then we have that knowledge and we can use that knowledge or we find shortcuts. So we become good at things very fast, but we have to be like interested in it. And for my whole life, I would go in, I would get good at something, and then I would want to go do something else. I want to move to a different state. I want to do da-da-da. And I've been accused of like poor impulse control, not, looking for happiness outside of myself, although that's never resonated. I'm a really content person, even when the shit's horrible. Not being able to sit still, like a lot of things that were like, no, this is who I am. I'm very ADHD, and there's a magic to this. I can tell when I'm on a session with someone, they don't even have to tell me they're a manifesting generator. I can nail it. I'm like, let's look up at your human design, because they always say, I can't pick something. I never finish anything. I definitely still had shame about not finishing things. And if you're familiar with my work, you're familiar with the graveyard of projects that I have started and abandoned on the internet. And I had a lot of shame about that until I really started to get in human design and was like, oh, I don't know. When I start something, I don't know if I'm going to like it, because that's not until I do it. And then when I do it and it doesn't work, then I leave it. And that's okay, because I'm not here to be the person that starts. Nobody's here to be the person that starts something and finishes it. We're supposed to kind of all work together in a way that nobody is doing anything they don't want to do. And you as a projector, I'm sure was real fun being in this world as a projector.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar, I think, to the manifesting generator, that I don't feel like I belong, and constantly getting, seen as somebody that's lazy or, I think a lot of the things that like early on I felt that were real parts of me, I was suppressing to try to fit in, and felt like I needed to, because that was the kind of conditioning of like, be a part of the tribe, fit in. But internally I always felt like I was faking it, until learning the projector like information and human design, that then allowed me to go like, oh, embrace that it's not laziness. You just need to show up right and actually perform something with the immense amount of focus that I knew I had, and I could really like, deliver on something that I was excited about, but sometimes didn't have the capacity to do it in that moment, that I needed to kind of go rest and like kind of isolate and find that excitement again. And then when it would naturally come up, I could deliver like anything within a short amount of time if I had the energy. And so I always equated that, and a lot of people that I would be trying to work with on a deadline, I think would see me as being lazy or not really engaged in it. But it was because I was fighting, like my body and my energy was wanting to go isolate and kind of think through things or whatever, just disengage for a minute to get clarity and come back. That was seen as lazy and like a really bad work ethic. Until I just then embraced it and actually like experimented with it, and then allowed myself to recognize, oh, when there's some deadline and I'm in a group working or something that I don't feel like being here, like I'm not going to feel bad and guilty about that. I'm just going to try to communicate that in whatever way that makes sense, and then go have my time, rest, isolate, and then I could show up and like everything would feel natural and exciting. So yeah, I think in general, like projectors and manifesting generators are energy types that have felt a difficulty in the world that is so conditioned, that conditioning that is not resonant with who they are. And in some senses, you can say, I always say this on sessions when I'm talking to projectors, is that they feel the same way, that they were never really like fit into the world. They had a lot to offer, but didn't know how to like bring it to fruition and how to speak about it. Is that they're, in one sense, you could say the world it was like kind of these last 400 years were built for generators, but it's kind of gone sour and is so upside down right now because there were not projectors that were actually doing and operating in the right mechanisms with their energy to then offer guidance for what is being built, to see that, like, you know, the way we have like whatever it is in the system that's not, that's kind of malfunctioning right now, whether that's like our effect on the climate with fracking and oil, or like factory farming and all of these things that like have worked to give us some kind of industry, but they're also like degrading it's like ruining the environment, or, you know, really like mean to animals, and all of those things is like what projectors are supposed to be able to now offer guidance so that doesn't happen, and kind of get us out of the upside down world. By not, you know, it's just whatever you're specifically into as a projector. It's not like this macro thing that everybody needs to listen to a projector. It's specific things. Like for me, it is a thing that I feel like I'm learning more about, is probably my gift, is to try to help people find their true authenticity and creatively express in a way that is meaningful to them. And some of that is like within just arts and music and entertainment, I guess, because that's been my experience. But there are other projectors that are specifically meant to guide how we can, you know, process food and animals in not a harmful way, or whatever other fields. So it's not like projectors are meant to like be these saviors of the whole culture, but
or in the deconditioning process, something that needs to be deconditioned is hierarchies.
right.
So that was something the very first episode I had Pete the Fairy on to talk about human design in 2020. And then I kind of abandoned it because it was so annoying how it just immediately got turned into this hierarchy of like, well, the projectors are the bosses. And it's like, no, this is like decentralized according to everyone doing what they want to do. And everyone needs each other in a way that's different than the codependent needing each other. So like projectors, like you need generator types. Otherwise, you don't really have energy.
Yeah.
And so you have to find the right ones, and everyone has to find the right things. We've done a couple things on Patreon, and there were several people who were disappointed to find out they weren't projectors because they related to you so much, which makes me think it's that there is something called the not self in human design. You can really get lost in the sauce.
There's so many.
There's something called the not self in human design, where there is the conditioned version of you. And what you're doing when you are the conditioned version of you is you are operating outside of the flow of your energy. And so if you are a generator who got it in your head from, you know, American propaganda that you are supposed to find a job and eke out your existence working a job that you hate, you have been, and then you're hanging out with friends out of obligation and trying to look like a good person by spending your energies in ways that your energy doesn't want to do, you are going to feel exhausted, and you're going to relate to Mark talking about not having energy.
Yeah.
Where if you actually think about like, well, what about when you're doing something you love? Then you're like, oh, I have access to an infinite well. If I hit a stride where I've got multiple things going on at once and I love all of them, you can't stop, and I can go and go and go and go and go. Even if you're stoked on what you're doing, you have to isolate and rest.
Yeah.
Otherwise you get really fucked up and it takes you a long time. I can just have a good sleep and I'm back, you know?
Well, and I don't perform very well either. I can convince myself that like, oh no, I have enough energy. I'm still excited about it. So the excitement sometimes will cloud out the like actual body response of saying like, hey, you need to isolate. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get the stuff done. But if I push that and just say, oh no, my excitement is meaning that I need to stay in here and work, I'll end up spending, you know, 6 hours on something that I'm like I'm not doing good work. I'm not like actually showing up and being effective. If I go rest and just trust that the excitement will be there when I rest, and I'm going to be more capable of delivering and showing up in like the way that I'm meant to, then it will be delivered. But it's hard for me, and I think a lot of projectors, to find that balance of knowing when it's time to stop and rest, as being beneficial to the final outcome of whatever you're doing. It doesn't mean that you're lazy and that you don't have the capacity to actually do it. You just need to listen to the energy. So you have to like default to the primary thing is like resting and knowing when the excitement is overriding what your body's actually like telling you to do,
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. But none of us moving forward, none of us, you might have heard people say like, no one wants to work these days. It's like, yeah, that's over. The premise of the last video game was, my log line for it was, sacrifice the individual to build infrastructure. So the video game has its own like energy being pumped out, and that energy conditions people. It sends, especially unconscious people, which we all were, until sometime in the last 20 years, sends out this energy, most of us, sends out this energy that's like, this is what reality's about. And so you're born and raised into this kind of vibe saying that this is what reality is about. And it's the constructs of that were like masculine energy, meaning pushing, driving, striving, mental energy, but also that men, people, left-brained people, and it was about work, and it was about building families, and it was about building infrastructure. It was about seeing if you can take this entire realm and turn it into one game, which really wasn't the case until the last, 400 years. And no one's having fun. And all of that left-brained energy has made it to where we are expanding for expanding's sake. So we're tearing down old ass forests to build crap. There's the exact same shopping center on every 5 corners. It all just is homogenizing. All the houses look the same. They're all built like shit. Like there is no innovation in it anymore, because it's like replicating like cancer. And it's what happens when you expand for expansion's sake, when you have masculine energy with no feminine energy to balance it. And now what the background frequency is doing is taking an intense right turn, and the energy is going from all left to all right. And that's the energy that's going to be pumping in the background, which is receptive energy. It's creative energy, but it's chaotic. And the deconditioning process is learning how to decondition from all the homogenized bullshit you picked up to survive in the consensus reality, and find yourself real quick, because you're going to have access to your actual energy and how it works, and how to be in that receptive energy. And if you can do that, you're going to have a blast moving forward. If you can't do that, or you don't want to, or you don't come across the information, or it never initiates for you, you're going to feel like you are living through some sort of Armageddon for the rest of your life. And it's so interesting already to watch the way that some people are like, woohoo, and other people are freaking out, right?
Yeah. One of the most interesting, it's like one of the harder conditions to get over is for me, and I think a lot of people I talk to, that there's this concept of when you're saying like there's this reality that we can get to, that you just do what you want, you do what you're excited about, and that's going to not only make you happy and feel fulfilled, but it's potentially going to make reality better if everyone's doing that. The conditioning really it's like when you just say like, oh, I'm just going to do what I want to do, that conditioning goes, well, that's selfish, and you're not looking out for the betterment of everybody, and then the whole society's going to fall apart if you do that. Because if the fireman's just doing what he wants to do and not showing up to work, if there's a fire, then who's going to put the fire out? And that's what I think is really interesting we can try to talk about just for a moment, because that makes sense when you're thinking of in the old reality, like, oh, that is selfish and that won't work. You have to, show up with some kind of responsibility and obligation to make the thing work. But I think it's hard for people to kind of like jump cut from that thinking to this idea that a side of them wants to be able to go like, oh, I don't have to go to the bank work job that I fucking hate. I can just do what I want and like actually be abundant and influence a society into a place where we can have this like cohesive fractal unit where everybody's doing what they want and it's all running smoothly, if not smoother than it has been. So what do you think are the like aspects of that validate the framework for like this fractal future human design kind of reality?
Years of deconditioning. And I think the thing that's really has always bothered me about the new age, like bastardization of this stuff is that you get people who, everyone has a different starting line, and we can call that starting line privilege, right? So some people are born on third base and other people are born on the bench, and some people are born where they haven't even gotten accepted into the team yet. And
what is third base again? Is that fingering or what is that? Sorry. God.
You are now kicked off of the football field for inappropriate.
What do you mean born on third base?
So if you're playing baseball, I don't know. I just heard it. I stole it from somebody. I think it's a phrase that I was born on third base. They told me to run home. So there's first base, okay. Second. Didn't you play T-ball or something?
Yeah, I played baseball, but then I started to, the baseball metaphor of being on bases was always sexual to me.
Oh.
Like, you're going to first base. Oh, you got to first base?
Yeah. All right. Well.
Anyways, sorry.
Pervert and the flail.
Masculine, stupid energy. Sorry. I'm just following my truth. I'm just following what I'm most excited about. I'm trying to guide your sexuality.
Totally derailed.
Sorry.
Well, we made it like 12 minutes into it before sexual innuendo.
Yeah,
That's
it was just too,
it's a favorite pastime in this house.
It was too easy. It was funny.
So different people are born at different spots in this lifetime, right? And the amount of deconditioning that you need to do to get to a place of leisure and ease is going to be dependent on the programming, whether or not you watched your parents struggle, how much that was like pumped into your head. In some ways, there are some people who, if they were raised with a certain level of like privilege or ease, like financial abundance is easy for them. But I know lots of people who, like, let's say they were really rich growing up, but their parents were very financially manipulative, and they have to do as much deconditioning as like I did as someone who, was in a trailer and like poor as a kid. Right. So, and that's money. And then it's also love. Like, does love feel really hard to attain or get a hold of? Whatever has a lot to do with like your experiences in life, like how you saw your parents live, like what messages were sent to you. Like, obviously we're all propagandized by like rom-coms, which are really unhealthy displays of love or whatever. So just like how those things work, it's the same thing. We were born and raised into a culture where, as a child from the age of 5, instead of playing like you should have been playing, you're put into school, and then you spent 12 years doing something you didn't want to do for 8 hours a day. Most people didn't want to do it. Then you have to go home, you have to do homework. And so your body, your nervous system says life is about doing things I don't want to do to survive. And if you're younger, it's even worse because many young people, like 35 and under, have lived through a ton of indoctrination and messaging that like you'll never own a house and you'll never whatever. So the idea of ease to a lot of people is completely foreign. And the premise of the game has been made about survival, which is, it's not true. It's not true. But if your lived experience is that and your nervous system is set to that, it takes years of decondition work to get out of that. And I know this because I I would say I began my deconditioning probably in 2018. And I would say I started to feel confidence around, 2008. And I started to feel confident in my deconditioning around 2018. So I spent 10 years. And I have a free abundance course that you can find at jessereed.com, where I put everything that I learned, and you can journal about it and do the homework and stuff and kind of get to the bottom of it. And then that was before I started this deconditioning work, which is more about showing up authentic, honoring my energy, and so I am probably going to be at 20 years of deconditioning and 28 years of being awake, in a few years. And I don't know that it ever ends. I think deconditioning ends, obviously, because you'd be conditioned into something else. And I think it gets shorter the more people are doing it, because there's more culture built around it. Like you and I live in a world where there aren't expectations of things. So what I don't like about the New Age movement is you get some like trust fund kid on here telling you like, yeah, just blah, blah, blah. And it's the things they're saying are true, but it's like, yeah, no, you can mentally know these concepts. It's going to take you years of trial and error and practicing and applying and taking opportunities to set boundaries and stair-stepping your way out of. You probably can't quit your job at the bank today and go home and just do whatever the fuck you want, because you will go into survival mode. You will go into fight or flight and freak out. If you could keep your shit together, you could, but we're not built that way. We have a nervous system that is keeping us safe, and our nervous system has been set to do what the consensus says is true. Otherwise, you're in danger. And that takes years to deprogram.
Yeah, and I don't think it's actually like the end goal of like being not conditioned anymore is not the thing you're trying to get to finally get relief from all of the whatever the pain or struggle of not being in the right, feeling like you're not in the right place. For me, it was daunting to learn early on, like, oh, it takes 7 years at minimum to decondition all this stuff. I was like, I don't want to wait 7 years to like relieve this depression or whatever. But I realized it's along the way, like the path is liberating when you trial and error and all of a sudden you crack something and you're able to then, okay, now I can leave the job and go to this other thing and start learning more and deconditioning more. For me, I've learned how it's subtle the conditioning is, where you think you've like made a lot of headway and you can see that there are certain parts of the reality that are like built to kind of enslave people's thinking. But it's the actionable stuff that like when you go day to day, you realize like, oh shit, I'm doing this out of habit. It's like some habitual thing I've picked up that's actually not benefiting me. How do I make that not a habit anymore? And the little bit that you like make progress on that over a week or two liberates you so much. And there's like a feeling of relief. So it's like along the way, there is this feeling of like I'm becoming something different. And that's liberating in its fact. So it's not like you have to wait 7 years to finally be released of this slave system you think you're in. And now you can be free and be authentic and express and be individual. It's like right when you start, like you can start, if you take it seriously, you can be liberated pretty quickly and get feelings like you have momentum, you know?
Yeah, something I would like to pick your brain about a little bit on here, because I think the experience that a lot of people are having is like, I have to work a job that I hate for not enough money to survive. And that is a story for a lot of people. And that's kind of, I guess that's why I kind of naturally there for a second started talking about money, is because I think that's a lot of people's primary. But there are a lot of people who, for whatever reason, just situationally, money isn't an issue, but they are still experiencing the life of not doing what their energy wants to do. Whether it be, not being authentic, not speaking their truth, still managing other people's emotional, internal experience for them, whatever. But I want to talk about the golden handcuffs of your experience in a successful band. I know you're tired of talking about it because it comes up all the time, but I think it is such a, for me, I found happiness and contentment while homeless. And that's one of the most valuable experiences I've ever had, because now that I know it's there was a quote from a self-help book I was reading at one point in my twin flame journey, but it said, happiness is here or it's nowhere. It's here or it's nowhere. It's not situational. It's not circumstantial. And if you keep convincing yourself that it's over there, if I had money, if I had a relationship, whatever, you will get there and be dissatisfied. And before I met you, I've known several people that have like climbed to the top of whatever the thing is they wanted to accomplish. And they hit kind of a scary point. I think that's a scary place for a lot of people. I think that's why you see so many quote unquote successful people turn to drugs or taking their own lives, because it's not there. And for me, it was like, I had the unique experience of, you know, I remember sitting in a bus depot. I've told the story a million times, but middle of the night, didn't have a cigarette, I was addicted to drugs. I didn't have any drugs, which meant I was just going to fall asleep at some point and not wake up. Like coming down off of meth, you're pretty vulnerable because you're like in a coma. I didn't have a quarter to call somebody. And even if I did, there was no one to call. I was like in between friend groups or whatever. And I was just alone with nothing. And, you know, my family thought I was dead at that point. I had nowhere to go. And something actually pretty awful ended up happening that night. Somebody ended up picking me up, and they weren't, you know, he wasn't a good person. But before that, I was sitting at this bus stop and was like, this is about as bad as it can get, you know? And this is during my addiction. So I was like intermittently homeless. You know, it wasn't new to be stuck outside for a night or whatever. And I was like without my own place the whole time, but I was weird and interesting. So I did a lot of couch surfing. People let me hang out, you know? And I thought to myself, like, I still felt held by something. I still felt okay. And I was like, I'm fine. This is fine. And then I realized that no matter what happens, I'm fine. Like at the worst, I'm fine. And I've checked in with that. It's not even fine. It's content. It's like, yeah, this is an experience. I'm having an experience. And, you know, some of the, you know, I was chronically ill, wake up every single day sick and out of energy. One of my least favorite experiences of my life. And I was still okay. I've grieved losses and I'm still like content in that moment. And that is something that carries me through every experience. And I'm like simultaneously experiencing the experience, but I have that center of knowing that the thing is right here. And I was very young when I had the experience. I was like 24 maybe. And so that has always just kind of given me this, it's fun to go after things, but I know that the thing isn't there. It's here. And I'm very, very grateful of all the experiences I've ever had in my life, having that one, because it takes the, oh God, what if you lose this? Oh God, what if you lose this? What if you don't get this? It takes that chase out. You have this like contrast experience of becoming very successful, very young, and realizing, oh God, it's not here. And then experiencing the golden handcuffs of not wanting what everyone else thinks you should want. And I think that's a big part of the conditioning, that a lot of times we just go with that same thing of like, when you're poor and you haven't experienced success, you do assume it's there. You do assume like, oh, I would be happy if I had that. And you cannot know what you would do in that situation until you're in that situation. And so, this same conditioning of doing what your energy doesn't want to do applies to something that a lot of people might think is the dream life. Oh, you haven't made. And so you didn't have like the financial restriction, obviously, because you're in something successful in your 20s, but you had the experience of dragging yourself through something you didn't want to do and then not quitting when you wanted to quit because you felt like everyone else's opinions of how you should be really grateful for this, right?
Yeah, it was hard. It was weird to have like a dream and a goal set that I thought would have this relief of happiness and that all my problems would go away. And more than anything, it was like a soul fulfillment I thought would kind of occur, that like I would feel valuable and have meaning in my life if I could achieve notoriety and success on a big scale, that would be like endlessly fulfilling, and that, you know, all my problems would go away. And I don't know if there are problems, but just like feeling uncomfortable and not content. Like I needed to go achieve something. And all along the way, I mean, all that stuff happened so fast with the band, like very early, that it was almost like a dream kind of happening. It was hard to kind of take some of it in as certain benchmarks occurred. Like the first time we played SNL was kind of a like, holy shit, like this is, I've watched this growing up and I never thought I'd be able to be on this stage. Seeing our video on MTV the first time was like, I grew up being inspired by MTV music videos and thinking that that was so off in the distance. I could never achieve that, but maybe someday. Going to the Grammys and being able to meet like legendary heroes of mine, play music with them, like playing with the Beach Boys. They were all so monumental and huge, but they fly by so fast. It's like kind of hard to go like, what, I'm doing it? Is this happening? You're just on this like energetic roller coaster of just like adrenaline pumping and validation and like ego inflating. That's all feels really good and fun, but ends up becoming like extremely temporary. And after the first 2 or 3 years of that wild ride, I did like come back home, and I actually went on a trip by myself because I had this weird feeling of like needing to unpack what all just happened. I was super excited about it and thankful, but I was like, why am I like uncomfortable about it? And went and isolated and just kind of really spent a lot of time remembering all the things that happened and going over it and feeling like proud that I had done it and grateful. But then a side of me that like soul thing was like immediately bored with it, or just not satiated and kind of confused of like, well, now where to go? What do we do? And I had part of me was kind of like, well, we could become bigger. What about our second record? And like, maybe there's other experiences that can be had that are going to be this same kind of fun roller coaster. But I think with like knocking off so many things in the beginning in those first 3 years that I never thought would have happened so fast, made me feel like it was like, oh, this isn't ever going to end. I'm going to get like bored with that too. I could also just like ignore the feeling and just keep chasing material success. And it's like, well, now I can buy a house, and maybe then I can buy 2 houses, and maybe I'll get a yacht at some point if we get big enough. And what's it like to play sold out stadiums across the world? Those all could have been like exciting to go have. But I think for me, I was like a little bit like bored is the only word I can think of. It's like, it's still fun, but like once you get to that place, it's like when you buy your first car, you're like, you think that's going to be the best thing in the world and it's going to liberate you and give you freedom. And like when I turned 16, I like wanted to just go drive anywhere. Like, Mom, do you need some groceries? Do you need me to go run an errand? Like, I love being in this car. After a year of that, it was like, don't ask me to go get the groceries. I don't want to get in the fucking car. I hate driving. It's become this kind of monotonous, mundane waste of time. And so it's like that, like on a bigger scale, that it felt like everything does become like mundane and like repetitive at some point. When it's a new experience, it's so exciting. It's like the fantasy phase in the beginning of a relationship. It's like, it's so great. And then soon you're hating each other for certain reasons. And that realization,
I told you not to tell them.
That realization for me was troubling, because I felt like I had achieved a lot that so many other people hadn't. And what does it mean if even that doesn't fulfill? What do I do now? Like, how do I be content? And it definitely took me like feeling that inner voice of kind of like, you need to go do something else maybe, which meant like I would have to leave. Was hard because of the perception of other people and them seeing that like I have everything that I could have ever wanted, and I met those dreams. But what would it mean if I chose to leave that? And it was hard to explain to anybody that hadn't experienced that I wasn't happy necessarily, because they were going, but you have all the money in the world, you have a house, you're on stage, isn't that so also awesome? I was like, yeah, it's awesome, but it's like hard to explain to you, like it's kind of work now. And I think finally allowing myself to be honest inside and go like, I'm okay leaving it. I have achieved it and it feels great. And I don't want to keep chasing this like insatiable thing that I can see is not going to bring any value. It'll be fun to have a yacht or something like that, but I don't want to keep chasing that because I can see that's going to end in some kind of like abuse of some sort, with a drug or with like all of that kind of just endlessly chasing fame. We can see in culture that usually doesn't go very well. And I could see that was an option, but I didn't want to do that. And I felt the thing that I was at challenge with is like, is it okay to pivot? Is it okay for me to go do music still in a different light, that I can do it on my own accord, that I don't have to uphold this huge machine that we've built, which is great on some levels, but it's also like, what if I want to take 3 years off? It's hard to get us all to do that because we have a machine going and other people are getting paid, and you have to adhere to like a timeline of work and not becoming irrelevant and all this other stuff that I just wanted to try to do something different. And I think I was resistant to that because of conditioning of saying like, well, this is your career, you have to stick to it because you've gotten this far, and if you leave, then you're going to deny the success. And if you go become something else, you're going to have to start all over again. And it feels like we got lucky, it worked. Why would you ever stop it? You know, so you have to stay in this career and don't give up what everybody else wants. But if inside I'm troubled and I'm like, I'm not happy, then at some point, like I realized that like I had to follow that. And I didn't know what the answer was necessarily, but I knew that I needed to stop doing whatever it was. And I think that's the biggest thing is like, if it's like this idea of that I'm kind of just, it's a rabbit hole I'm in right now, that exchanging the idea of like being with becoming instead is like the thing that is the process of life, and is where I think the real contentment is, and happiness is understanding that like we're in a constant state of becoming something new and fresh. That's what keeps it exciting, and that's what makes my soul like start to feel fulfilled, because I know it's like this endless process, and that involves pivoting when it feels right, when it's like, oh, I'm done with this and I am thankful for it, but I think I want to try something new, and I'm going to become something different. If you stay in it because of the obligation reasons that culture says or people say, you're not fully becoming something new. You do hit a stagnation that starts to like, for me, my soul was in combative nature with like my external being, and that combating was going to lead to like drug abuse and just like a kind of turmoil. And when I just liberated myself and was like, well, I'm going to go try something new, and I don't know exactly what that is, I'm going to jump off and figure that out, and realizing that that's like an act of becoming, and it's kind of is this creative act of knowing I'll be able to figure out and enjoying the process of trying to like, you know, jump off and then rise again in a new way, in whatever way that was going to be. Like I didn't have necessarily an idea. I knew I wanted to do music, but I knew I also wanted to take a break from music, and was very interested in like philosophy and like the understanding the nature of reality and all of that. And that's just what I did. So I was doing that before I left anyways. And it's kind of what gave me courage to jump, was beginning to understand that there is this like never ending process, and that the contentment doesn't exist at the end of the road somewhere for a career or success or anything, that it is this realignment of like becoming is the kind of contentment, and being open to following wherever that leads you, whatever's exciting. And so when I have felt times where I'm like, if I'm in the wrong place or doing something I don't want to do, I'm lacking some kind of creative aspect or perspective to see it in a different way and go, well, if I'm not excited about it anymore, it doesn't mean like poor me. I spent so much time in this job, I can't give it up. If I'm creative enough, I can like figure out a way that is a validating thing, a validating pivot point that I can go, I'm done here. And now let's be creative and figure out what else excites me, that is authentic to me. And that is liberating. It feels very good. And it feels like I'm on an adventure of some kind of story, making the arc of my whole life like a very interesting story that has ups and downs, and like you succeeded and then you went down and became a nobody, and then you found some other interesting thing and explored. By the end of my life, there will have been this like very interesting peaks and valleys. Instead of like hitting that peak and then staying in it for obligation, or because that's what I'm supposed to do to continue to be happy, it was very clear to me that wasn't going to occur. I was like deeply depressed by the end of it.
Well, two of the constructs from the past video game that you were crushing were consensus. You lived in a consensus of like what it means to be successful. You were objectively, from the group's perspective, successful. You had made it or whatever. And then continuity. I feel like most of what I was talking about in 2019 was just giving people permission to end relationships, because there was still this programming that, well, I've been here for 10 years already. And it's like, okay, well, then you did it. If you don't want to be there anymore, looking at it as if I've already invested so much time, that's like conditioning from continuity. It's like, yeah, you did it. You were in the band, you did the thing for 10 years, and now you don't want to do it anymore. So you move on. But that continuity is like, well, you have it, so you have to keep going. And
it was hard for me to like, I had to sit with that for a while. Like, am I actually okay with letting this go? Because it was this deep conditioning that like, yeah, I did it and I'm here, stay. Like, this is what I thought as a kid was going to be like the meaning of life, like get to a successful position and garner all the wealth and attention from it and live a happy life. And so when I had to process, like, are you done playing on big stages and maybe more TV shows and playing, making new art that will succeed in a different way? There's aspects of that I could still carry on. I can still make art and succeed in a different way. But all the like big glam parts of it was hard for me to like, I had to sit with for a while and go like, I am content with it. Like you did it. And it was constantly like, yeah, man, like it's not, because it felt like work at a certain point. Like it was weird playing gigantic festivals and big shows where people are losing their minds and just like loving the music. And that felt good every time. It felt really satisfying to connect into that energy of expressing and playing music in a way that's kind of this hypnotic trance that the entire audience and the band get in together is so fun. But I knew I could have that other places and I would have that again. But in that current state, it was like massive shows and like exciting things to somebody that hasn't had that really felt like work to me. I had to get blasted high to go do it and still have some fun. It was really mundane, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. But I had to like convince my external self that that's really what is going on, like inside, that I don't want to do it. And when I finally said it, like I tried to leave in so many kind of different ways of like articulating why, that were more focused on like turmoil within the group. But at the end of the day, when it finally came to point and like I wasn't they weren't like picking up the kind of the reasons why I wanted to leave, or they were trying to adjust themselves to like make it a more, balanced place to be. I finally was like, listen, guys, I think I'm just done. Like I don't need to do it anymore. Actually, I know that sounds crazy because like you guys are still chasing it. And that's great. But like, I just don't want to fucking do it. Like, I don't really want to play stadiums. I don't want to go do any of this stuff. If y'all want to just like make art for art's sake and like there's no agenda and we can just sit back and we don't necessarily have to tour it, we can make the record and put it out. If we want to try to do something like that, like I'm down. I can, if I can show up when I want to show up and it feels exciting, then I'll try, you know. But we were on different pages, and it was weird for me to say it, because I knew when I was saying it, I was like, this is the nail in the coffin. This is like, you can't argue that. If I'm just saying like, I don't want this anymore. You know, it's like, for them, they're kind of like, what?
Yeah.
You don't want this. This is what we've been working for. But I'm also somebody that I am deeply creative in my mind, like, and I have a lot of desire to do different things. I have many different interests, and some people are not that way. You know, for I think a lot of musicians and a lot of artistic people are really good at this one thing, and they kind of center their entire life around that, and they are somewhat content with the accolades and the stuff that comes from being successful at that. But for me, you know, like, I grew up doing art in so many different ways, but like making film was like my first thing that brought me out to LA, that eventually got me into a band. And I loved music as well. And so then I did music for a while, and I always wanted to kind of go back and try to do some like niche art film stuff. And I like painting, and I like creating like spaces, living spaces, and I like gardening, and all of those things are like creative acts that I really want to explore and enjoy. And so I think that's what also helped for me to be okay with like putting this torch down, and I want to go explore something else. But for other, you know, people in the band and in a lot of places in life, that they don't have anything else to go to, so they actually want to stay, and that's valid. But I think
like even our front yard is like a work of art. You like mow the lawn in a design with a growing patch in the middle and everything, and the trees are perfectly cut out and a thing. Like when I go walk out in the yard, I'm like, everything you do is like a creative, artistic expression. And now at this point in your life, because you've already experienced that, you have the freedom of realizing that the purpose of artistic expression is just the feeling of it coming out, which is a construct of the new thing, which is just authentically expressing. The thing that used to make people go, gotta work, gotta work, gotta go to work, gotta go to work, is now making people go, I need to express artistically. And so when you make a matcha latte for me, when I make a matcha latte, it's like, and then when you make a matcha latte, it's this beautiful, like...
What is the sound that mine makes? Yeah, well, and I think that's for me, that is what, like, I that's a part of contentment too. And it's also, I don't know, there's like so many jump off points from this, but I think there is a way to look at life as like it is a extremely artistic, creative act in every moment. There's a potential, there's an opportunity to do the mundane task in some kind of like artistic, expressive way that is not meant to be like, let me show people and make money off of this, but it's meant to like have a very unique, one-of-a-kind experience that only you as an individual can bring to the table, because you're showing up with all of your experiences, life, and your perspectives and stuff, and you are making the matcha latte with all of that coming out and doing it in a certain way that feels fun to you, and it's creatively expressive, and it's one of a kind. It's like, and that is what, like, I think looking at life that way, creativity and looking at art as a piece of artwork, like the entirety of your life, can make any moment that you're like feeling like I'm not in the right place, I'm not doing the right thing, it means there's some lack of creative expression. And if there is no room for you to be creatively expressive in whatever job you're doing, then you can look at it in a certain way and make it creative. Even if you're like showing up to the bank and doing this stuff, like you can do something in there that's unique to you, that starts to align you with this more like artistic expression of life in general, that you'll creatively figure out how to get out of that job if you don't want to do it anymore. Because maybe the way you're showing up and making it fun and creative is when you have downtime or you're doing bake teller notes, you're also drawing a little doodle on there every time. And as you do that, you then realize you're like practicing this thing where you're like, I'm actually a really good drawer. And then somebody sees it and they're like, that's a fucking amazing thing. I'm looking for a animation guide. Can you do animation? And you're like, oh shit. Yeah, I do. Maybe I can leave this bank job and go do that. It's just an example of, like, I think instilling creativity into whatever the thing is that you're not like happy with anymore can liberate and get you out of it, because the act of life is like, it is art, it is creative. And I think some people might see that as like kind of pointless, but for the internal state, it like brings you into this other awareness, for me, that is satisfying, and it like does make me content with seemingly mundane things. It like pulls you up into a higher frequency of looking at it that way.
Yeah, it's changing reality being an algorithmic simulation of some sort. It's the same thing when if you start paying a lot of attention to art on your For You page, or your whatever thing you're scrolling on, you start paying attention to art or things about leisure or things about vacations versus like bummer doom scrolling, then the algorithm is going to bring you more of that stuff. The reality that you live in is literally the exact same thing. Like the algorithm of social media is a direct mirror of the algorithm of this reality, and the stuff you have been conditioned to pay attention to, because the attention is what determines what comes back to you, is the thing that will be reflected back to you. So if you have been conditioned that life is about working a job you hate, staying in a relationship that's run its course so that you can be a good person or for the kids or to stick to something or whatever, and that is what you are putting all of your time and energy into, that's all you're ever going to get. If you have been conditioned to believe that life is about survival, then that is the life that you will lead, is a life that is about survival. And that is the reason that you have some people living a life, and it's not moral. It's not because good people get good things. It's not how the world works. And so then you get a lot of people who are like, it's not fair. Oh, reality's not fair. It's just algorithmic. And if you are born into a life and told it's about survival your whole life, and you witness struggle your whole life, you just don't even, it doesn't occur to you to go, I'm going to orient toward leisure. And there is this movement now of people who have experienced like really difficult lives, and they were born into poverty and they were not born to privilege. And, they experienced abuse in youth, and they did nervous system work, and they started to orient their algorithm to leisure or ease, and now they live a life of ease. And it's like stupid that it's that simple. It's simple. That doesn't mean it's easy.
Right.
It's simple, but you have been conditioned to believe that everything is extremely difficult. And so one part of deconditioning that I love is the getting to know yourself. Once you get to know yourself and you get to know what your body wants, then you start to lean into that. And what you're talking about is like, if you want to be a creative, but you're working at the bank and you hate working at the bank, bring that creativity in, because you're then moving your little jelly beans on the scale over to the creative side. And eventually the algorithm will flip. That's like a favorite like hack for moving to a funner job or moving to a funner career, starting your own career, is just divest as much energy as possible from the things you don't like. And sometimes that just means doing a lot of them on autopilot and moving as many eggs into the basket of the thing that you want to experience. Yeah. And then it just tips the algorithm. Yeah, I think the things that we actually want, I think, have become really surprising. And I think your story is a great example of that, where you are someone who mostly likes to be home. You're someone who really enjoys cultivating a home environment, cultivating the nature outside. It's like you're like a Mr. Miyagi kind of, like, it's very meditative for you, and you like to improve the house and work on the house and be free to deep dive rabbit holes and whatever, but you are a pretty introverted homebody. And fun to be an artist, but not fun to be on tour, 9 months out of the year and out of that environment. And that is the sort of stuff that, like, in the past, before the energy started to shift, people would be so swept up in but I'm famous and everyone likes me, and the validation and the nice restaurants and the nice hotels and the whatever. They'd be so lost in that they wouldn't be tuned into, but my body likes to be home, and I don't need these over the top, overstimulating. I think that's the thing that as we become more sensitive, I think we're becoming supernatural people, and on our way to supernatural, we are becoming as sensitive as animals, is what I think is happening. Our fucking food sensitivities are crazy. Our sensitivity to light, I can hear the fucking electricity. The smells, can't handle the smells.
I would say it's almost like we're becoming, just to say that in a different way, that it feels actually like that's what we've always had the capacity to do, but the conditioning has like almost put on these multiple layers of filters that don't allow us to see and feel those things. Like, animals have more like psychic ability in some ways than we do, but that's because they don't have the conditioning filters of the culture and everything. And so that as you decondition, it's like all of a sudden those things start coming online.
Yeah, that's a better way to say it.
And I think that's what is like becoming supernatural, or some kind of super version of this, is actually like getting the goddamn filters out of the way that are actually of no value towards being an individual and actually broadcasting your unique thing. The more you decondition, the easier it is to do it.
Yeah. It's like we are so dissociated, which is like what I think of when I think of like a sleep. It's like I'm remembering, let's say I'm in a dream where my life is something completely different. And then I wake up in the morning and I remember like, oh, that's right. I live in North Carolina. I'm with Mark. I do this, blah, blah, blah. That's what I think of when I think of awakening. I think it's something else that people project stupid ass hierarchical stuff onto it, where it's literally like, no, we've been in a little snooze where we forgot all of our own power and our own magic. And now we're just waking up, remembering who we are. But it really does come down to who you are as an individual. And my belief is that if every individual, or most individuals, remembered who they are, because we are all part of one big organism, then it would run like a well-oiled machine, because maybe the fireman who's currently the fireman wants to actually go be a bartender. And it's not quite, the infrastructure wouldn't be the same. So, we wouldn't live in a corporate reality if we were all in our own energy. But I do believe most people enjoy doing some sort of work that's true to them, So it's like someone who's really into tools would own that hardware store, but the hardware store wouldn't be open, be open when they feel like it's open, or whatever. You put in an order, but there wouldn't be a hardware store on every fucking corner. And you wouldn't need it to be that convenient, because you wouldn't be working your life away all day doing something you fucking hate. And that fireman would go then open up a bar. I don't think we'd have bars, but you know what I mean? Go open up a kava bar, and then there's someone else who's always wanted to be a fireman, but he had to go into the real estate business that his dad handed to him or whatever.
Right.
Like, if everybody got off of the obligation train and did something that they enjoy.
I just think something that's really interesting about when you really feel into and think of the potential of a reality that is individually based, so everybody's doing what they specifically have to bring to the table, that's not only predicated on like what interests them and what are their gifts, but it's being like seeded in from the entire experience of their life. So like that's influencing how they're showing up, and it's kind of dictating what is unique about them if we allow it to. We've been conditioned not to do this, but what's so interesting when you think about that there's like, it's so diverse, the difference in everybody, when you consider just like how they were brought up in a specific location with a specific parent and economical background and a political views and all of those things that are kind of seeded in. But then, and then, you know, genetics and everything that are in there as well. There's like every single person is like really so different. And so if you think about that in the context of yourself, you're like one of a kind in a pool of like a billion people, like however many people we have on this earth right now. There's like literally no one else that is like you and has the specific experience that you have. So yeah, there are people that are similar. They look the same. They show up the same and they kind of have the same things. But like one of them grew up in Estonia and one of them grew up in the United States. And like, because of that experience, like they're going to, if they're doing the same craft, they're going to express it very differently. And it's super unique. And so keep following that idea and this desire or this kind of potential of deconditioning the homogenized, you need to show up like everybody else does in this work. Here's how you do it. Here's the way. That you can look at yourself as like the importance of deconditioning and broadcasting your weirdness, your uniqueness, your specific thing. You're doing that because everyone else needs it, because you're the only one that can do it. Like, there is no one else that can do it like you. Based on just your experience, like because you were brought up a certain way, that garnered like a certain perspective. And if you're able to tap into the creative well that you specifically have for ideas of expression in whatever field you're doing, it's going to be one of a kind. And that's what everybody wants, is like the one of a kind thing. We're no longer in this kind of mode of wanting the homogenized music, the homogenized trendy thing.
Yeah.
Those are all like elements and like effects of what happens when there is one unique genius thing that happens and everybody goes, let's do that, because we're after more attention in the tribe, because we think that that's what gives you happiness and success. But as I've just talked about, I know from experience that doesn't work. So the real value, and I think it's now what I'm aligning to be kind of the only point and the liberating factor of getting out of the homogenization and the kind of like slave system that's been built, is to be like creatively rebellious in your ability to like uniquely express what is inside you in whatever field it is. And like I was saying, it's like you can do it day to day in mundane aspects. And the more you're making an effect on your environment and the world around you in like a truly unique individual way, that's like you're going to start broadcasting like your signal of uniqueness that other people desire and want. And that's what I think the fractal kind of thing that we've talked about before, where there's a reality of everybody being individually authentic and following that. If everyone is doing that, or even small groups of people do that, this fractal connection happens where everything syncs up and everybody's needs are met, and we're happy doing it, that you pull into like a new level of unity consciousness that is thriving and like is really fast, like it's quickly creative to continue becoming and making new strides in existence, because there's like a huge creative abundance of everybody doing it together. And that becomes like this fractal organism. It's like another being of connections that's like high functioning and impenetrable to like slave system kind of aspects of politics and social like hierarchy. It can't penetrate that because it's so abundantly creative and constantly like building on itself. But that requires like really being extremely authentic and individually based, and like knowing that you have something that no one else has to offer. And it doesn't make you better. It makes you holding your space in the thing. And that's what like everyone wants to see and do, you know? But the more you resist that and like listening to the conditioning or having this desire to kind of fit in, that is it's in resistance to the individual creative act, which I think in a term is like, I want to talk about at some point later. It is an act of rebellion towards the system that is trying to homogenize to get people all on one same page.
Joy is?
No, Jesus. That's an inside joke, but we'll probably beep that one out. But yeah, being individually creative and as most authentic, like knowing that you have a specific thing, like I just can't repeat it enough. Like it's like everyone is so unique, and like they only like each person only has. They have like such a unique thing to bring to the table that everybody else really wants to experience. And I just, there's so much power to that to me. It's like, it's the liberating factor of all of this. But if you're not allowing yourself to be creative, even in the mundane, then we're never going to discover the real you, because you're going to be homogenizing yourself and like clouding out the weird uniqueness. When that's all we want to see is what's so unique about you. Like you're weird and all these other things coming from an experience that only you have had. Tell us about it. Show us it in art, you know?
I'm going to use this as an opportunity to do a commercial for your sessions, because this is the lifeguard chair that you're in is the lifeguard chair for people who are creatives, or it really can be anyone, but people who want to embolden their individual creative voice and break free from, well, this is the way you're supposed to do it. And then also projectors who are learning how to express authentically as a projector and how to use that energy. Mark does sessions for that. And
I reject wholeheartedly that no one is not creative. Like
everyone's creative.
Everyone is creative. You goddamn better like believe that that's what is occurring. Even if you don't consider yourself an artist, it's like there is something that you have that's uniquely to you. And if you express that, that is creative. It's like it's bringing something to the table that we don't have yet. And so that's what I like. There's so many people I've talked to that don't think they're creative and they just have to do these mundane things, but yet they're like coloring in their coloring book every morning, or they even just vacuuming can be like an artistic like thing, the way you move the lines and stuff. It's not a talent. It's like an innate thing that's there, but people don't believe it and don't allow that to kind of come out.
Maladaptive daydreaming is an art of mine. I've spent most of my life in some sort of, that's why I like to be alone a lot, is because I'm just playing out some scenario that has never happened and probably will never happen, where I'm like arguing with someone or experiencing something. I've been doing that my entire life. I just found out there's a name for it.
Maladaptive daydreaming.
Maladaptive daydreaming, which is beautiful. I want to put it in a song lyric.
Well, and I think that that's another important part of the liberation aspect of like getting us to a new place of harmonized existence, is the creative act of imagining something that is not there yet. And doesn't mean that you have to innovate it and build it. Again, if we align with the human design stuff, like maybe you're a manifester and there is an extreme spark of creativity inside your mind to think up of a concept that isn't quite there yet, that we don't have yet in society. And especially if you are conscious and you have like an understanding of the nature of reality, like you can probe into certain ideas that other people can't, that are still connected to a homogenized system. And if you can imagine those things and just put it out there and daydream about it, like reality is reflective. Somebody's going to pick that up somewhere and start to build it. And, or you can actually go find how to build it, but not being disheartened by the idea of like, well, this is too much of a radical idea. I could never build this. I could never do this myself in my garage. No, like imagine like the possibilities and then creatively figure out how to make it like come to fruition. You don't have to build it. But I think that's like a huge thing too. It's just, we need people, I think, in the reality moving forward that are like conscious beings that can imagine the impossible and get it in a place that we can actually try to build that and integrate it into the society. That's like going to liberate everything.
Yeah, some of us are just supposed to, I invent things all the time that I'm never going to be the one to invent it, but I maybe brought it out of the
Yeah, because you've had ideas
ether.
that then like 10 years later, it's like, boom, it's in the society.
Yeah, I've been inventing things since I was a little kid. And so we live in a competitive separation consciousness society. So it feels like, well, I'm not the one that got paid for
I
the
didn't get
spray diaper
recognition.
ointment. Yeah. And so we got to go in a second, but the plane I failed to land earlier, and I really can't figure out why I went on the tangents I did to get to it. But for me, a lot of the deconditioning for the last few years, I guess I was trying to say, hasn't been around getting out of the workforce or whatever. That happened for me a little while ago. But what I have realized since the pandemic, and the pandemic happened at the same time that I got Lyme disease, and so I was grounded, and then I just kind of never went back to stand up, and I never went back to a lot of the life that I was living before then. And something I've really realized, I've always been someone that marches to the beat of my own drum, but no pun intended, but I have been someone who masked a lot. And I have been someone who socially does not naturally show up the way that other people show up. And those are expectations where I've been trying to act normal, I guess, like trying to make eye contact, trying to make small talk, trying to, meet people where they're at so I don't seem weird. And also put myself into a lot more social situations than I'm comfortable with. And there's something that has really just kind of shifted. And I'm very comfortable with the fact that I'm pretty introverted. And I think I've been trying to force myself to be extroverted. I'm not a very outgoing person. And I just don't have a real interest in getting to know strangers unless it's purposeful. And after doing nervous system work, I realized how stressful it is on my system and stressful just because I don't want to slug through talking to someone. It's just, for me, I'm just to get to the point. I used to have a joke about, can we just get to the part where we talk about when we got molested? Because it's all the other shit is whatever. And it's not because I'm too hip for small talk, but it's just it's the same. I can't watch long form stuff. It's just what is the point here? What are we trying to get to? And if it's deep, and then it's meandering because it's exploratory, cool. But I think of my life of being in green rooms with people that I'm you don't like me. You don't give two shits about me. We don't have to talk. We don't need to discuss the other venues we've been. I can just sit here in silence. If I go get my hair done, we don't need to talk. I'm not the person who's been doing my hair has been doing it for 20 years. So we gossip. But if I have to go to someone else, it's we don't have to talk. We don't have to do this. We don't need to do, socialize, And that's been, for me, something that is not something I knew about myself. I thought I was someone who deeply desired to be able to connect with strangers, and that I had social anxiety, and that there was something wrong with me and I needed to fix it. And then I did nervous system work, and now I'm more still and comfortable than I've ever been. I'm fine in those situations. And I'm I just don't like these situations. I don't care to be here. But I had it in my head in the conditioning that I needed to be a part of this big world that I don't actually have to be a part of. And then weirdly, I'm more comfortable now with small talk in situations at the cashier. I'm not doing this contracting thing. I can be fucking normal in the cashier, where I used to really struggle with that. But I just realized I don't want to go to parties. I don't ever want to be at a party. I don't want to go to half of my family's things. So I don't. I'm just I do get overwhelmed with all the noise and the chaos, and I don't understand it. And I'm much more drawn to small, intimate groups of intentional, deep conversations. And otherwise I'm this could be an email, and those are the kind of things that I think as people start to get into their authenticity, it's not I don't want to be a bank teller. I want to sing opera. It's no, the shit you're going to find out about yourself can also be really mundane. I love yard work. Yeah. Or I just don't ever want to go to another fucking party as long as I exist. I used to be the person at the party, going through my calendar because I was awkward and I didn't know what else to do. Now it's no, I just will never go to another one. It would be great. I'm not for that. That's great for other people. I'm done LARPing consensus reality. I'm done pretending. I'm done assimilating. I'm done trying to figure out what it is that y'all like about tourist attractions. I'm never doing it again. I will travel to the place. I will sit in the hotel room and I will eat room service and I will love it. I love being a very introverted person and not apologizing for not knowing how to show up the way that people, other people seem to like it. It's like, yeah, I don't. Fun. I'll just do whatever the fuck I want, It's so nice to take the mask off. And also something that's really changed, which I guess we'll talk about, we'll do a people pleaser episode or something. But man, I was the most indirect person in the world, just the most avoidant of conflict or rejection my whole life. And in the unmasking process of the last couple of years, I am here's the direct thing. Here's the shortest path, the least amount of words necessary, and no emojis, no exclamation points. We're done with that. Hey, do you think maybe we could It's direct question. You can say no. Let's easy peasy transaction. Whew. I mean, I don't know how much of this is awakening, perimenopause, finding out you're autistic. I don't know what is what anymore. I don't care, but it's so nice to just be it's okay that I'm different than everyone else. And I don't, and I'm different than the different people. Cause that's what you see a lot of people breaking off and going, okay, well, this is what autistic people act like. And this is what gay people act like. And this is what this acts like. And then that's even starting to split off. It's everyone's different than there are no monoliths.
Yeah.
There are just individuals that used to coagulate into identities. And, we're never putting that genie back in the bottle in this lifetime. It's just going to keep splitting and splitting and splitting, which is what I think the quote unquote split mythology is about, right? A lot of intuitive people were there will be a split. I think the split happened in 2020, and I don't think it was this team from this team. So I think it was we were all playing on a gigantic iceberg, and then boom, in 2020, that iceberg split into a million different pieces, and those pieces are slowly drifting away from each other. And the only time that your iceberg and another person's iceberg are going to play in a game together is if you are naturally, organically kind of drifting into the same direction and you like it. But there's no obligation for you to come stand on my iceberg and follow my rules of what is beautiful or what is desirable or what is moral or whatever. It's we're just going to get better and better and better at being individuals. And then weirdly, I don't think the worldwide infrastructure will last. I think that as we become more individual, it will fall apart. And we are still conditioned by that. So we still think in terms of okay, well, how are we going to get the fruit from one country to another country? And it's no, we're going to wake up to the fact that that's so fucking stupid.
Well, and also that I think there's if you're being individually, we're breaking off, there's innovation that can happen there that I think is beyond our understanding yet, because we don't know what it's like to have a group of people that are fully autonomous and individual and happy and powerful. What kind of things you can implement into the society that via technology or whatever that makes still possible to have consumerism, have everybody fed, and there's so much tech right on the brink of being made, or even that's made that's not even publicly out there, that I think we can slide into something that there might be a transitional phase of everything kind of having to go offline and figure out how ridiculous some of those mechanisms were to get food, to eat food in the States that's coming from China via Brazil all the way down when we have the ability to do it here. That kind of shit is of course going to go away. But I don't think it needs to be it's going to come back to this egalitarian, traditional way of living. We might do it temporarily, but the potential for technological innovation from a conscious standpoint, integrating it into conscious being society, I think is going to make that possible. But I like what you said, is like there is that worldwide control society system, like it actually, and this is why I was saying creativity is a liberator and individuality, is like it can't work if everybody is being uniquely individual and authentic and refusing to homogenize to any kind of one way of being. That's how they keep everybody in a controlled thing. It's like you have to go all think like this, and then you can corral them. The less you do that and the more you kind of see that, oh, the path is like, I'm just going to be me, an individual. I'm going to work on that. I'm going to decondition and know that inside, the more I do that, the more protected I am. And the more I'm going to like, that other thing is just going to fall apart. Not because we fought them in a war and like she revealed and had this disclosure. It's because it's like, they can't control me. I'm an individual, autonomous being that like sees your game. It just doesn't work anymore. So it falls apart. It's fucking beautiful.
I love it. You can't dominate a bunch of autonomized, empowered individuals because you can't exploit their attention.
Yeah.
In order. You can't overtake them. Not that many. All right. We have to go.
I gotta pee.
We have to school shop. So
you want to go to third base a little later?